I thought I would continue with session 5, I think, on the letter to the Hebrews and go over some of the things we were going over last time. Uh, in the Old Testament, you have the notion of God interacting with humanity through his word or his spirit. You know, the spirit comes upon David when he's anointed by Samuel. The spirit comes up, upon Samson and gives him this strength. The prophets, the word of the Lord came to, etc. And the word, this famous, interesting passage in Jeremiah. See if I can find it quickly. I think it's 23, but don't hold me to that. In Jeremiah 23, it says, if they had stood or been present at the sod, the divine council, the sons of El, or the sons of God, of Yahweh, and have seen and heard his word. You can see the word of God and hear it. In the divine sod, this council of the Bnei Elohim, or sons of God, in Jeremiah 23:18. So you have this sort of hypostasis, as Rabbi Joseph Baumgartner calls Melchizedek, a divine hypostasis, if I recall correctly. And so what you have in Hebrews is really, I think, stemming from this idea that God spoke through the prophets in the past, but in the end spoke through a son. So this word son is the operative sort of word, even in the letter to the Hebrews. In other words, we know Jesus had a unique consciousness of being God's son. I think from the baptism, you are my beloved son. The prayer in Gethsemane, Abba, Father, using this expression for God that I think is considered unusual by scholars. Isaiah refers to God as Father. It's rare in the Old Testament to find God addressed as Father, but I think it's third Isaiah will say, "You are our Father," etc. Sort of, in one of these Advent type penitential in Isaiah 63:16. You are our Father. Abraham doesn't know us, or Israel doesn't remember, but you, Yahweh, are our Father. Avinu, I guess it in Hebrew. Your name is the one who rescues us or redeems us from forever, from forever. And so you have this, background, but you have not only then the glory of Yahweh that is in the priestly school, the one that inhabits the temple, or the name, the Shem Hashem, the name of Yahweh that is really the one that dwells in the house that Solomon built, as sort of hypostases of God, reality, sort of like self-standing, not independent from God, but sort of their own constitution reality. And now you have the use of the concept son in a new way. Because again, son in the Old Testament is first of all, I think, Israel. In Exodus 4, the firstborn son of God is the people of Israel. Then you have the sons of El that I was talking about, these semi-divine beings or lesser divinities, part of the divine council. Let us make man in our own image, or other passages like that. I'm not going to repeat everything I said before. Then you have the Messiah, King, as God's adopted son. So that's another one. Then you have this, as I said, suffering in Greek, especially pais, P-A-I-S, which is both a child and a servant. And that's the expression or the word used by the Septuagint, the Greek translation of Isaiah 53, the fourth song of the suffering servant, Ebed Adonai, but in Greek they call him Pais, which ties in very well again with the book of wisdom, especially chapters 2 and 3, where you have both an individual called both the Pais Theu, the child or servant of God, and the Huios Theu, the son of God, and they're merged. So this is all, I think, cultivation, if you will, breaking the ground for the idea that even though he has sent his word in the past through the prophets and even revealed his glory in the ark, etc., in the end, God reveals himself through his son or a son, his son. His translation says his son, but you don't have to say his, the possessive article. And so this is the Christian innovation that God has now interacted with humanity, with the Word incarnate. The Word became flesh, John 1:14, and dwelt among us, placed his tent among us, which in fact the scholars would tell you that this eskenosen in Greek, the SKN consonants are like the Shekinah, sometimes it's pronounced, this glorious effulgence of God that appears when the Jews study Torah, etc. Not a word that really appears in the Old Testament, but shakan, the verb to dwell, does appear, or even to dwell in a tent. So that you have this idea that uniquely God has now interacted with humanity through his own son in a unique sense. And again, this son is a perfect image of the Father. John's gospel is going to say the Father and I are one. Whoever sees me sees the Father. Those are all Johannine ways of expressing what Hebrews is saying about God being the the character, the imprint, etc., or again the radiance. Of course, in the Gospel of John, God will manifest his glory in the cross of Jesus. God will manifest his extreme love. He so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, John 3:16. So that, and you have this glory, which is what the Son is, the refulgence or the splendor of the glory of God. By the way, again, as some additional background to this letter to the Hebrews, as far as what it will start saying about Jesus and his sacrifice, we always have to go back to Isaiah 52:13 through 53:12, the fourth song of the suffering servant. And if you looked at it in Hebrew, it would say, behold, my servant shall have insight, which is a very good word, actually, the sakal verb in Hebrew, to be insightful. Translated will prosper. I know that, but that's not a good one. In the Greek version of Isaiah, it'll be this, have intellection or insight into something. But in Hebrew, the sakal verb is actually what gives rise to these masculine in Daniel. getting a little bit technical, but these are followers of the servant, but to focus on the messianic aspect of this, if you went to Jeremiah 23, you would have a righteous shoot that will be raised from David, and it'll be a Hiskil king, a king with insight. This Jerusalem Bible is translating a prudent king. It's really, and it's a Zema Zadik. It's a righteous sprout. Zema being a messianic, sprout is messianic. But then you also have a king. Suppose this is a Malak, uh, who is his skill, who has this insight. And so, if you looked at Isaiah, in Hebrew, it would say, behold, my servant shall have insight. He shall be, Ram Wenisa, he shall be exalted and lifted up and very high. A triple exaltation of the servant in Hebrew, just almost like the Philippians, every knee shall bend in the earth, under the earth, and above the earth, etc. Here in Isaiah, you have a triple exaltation in Hebrew of the servant by referring to his being lifted up, which is another thing we could talk about some other time. But in the Greek translation, this pais, this child or servant, is only exalted in two ways. He shall be lifted up, ipso, and then he shall be glorified exceedingly. So in the Greek version of the fourth song of the suffering servant read Good Friday, at the very beginning of the service, in Greek you have a double exaltation, but very interesting. He shall be lifted up and he shall be glorified. And that corresponds exactly to the Gospel of John, which in key passages talks about the lifting up, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, or when I am lifted up from the earth, you will know that I am, in John 8, or then in John 12, when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself, indicating the manner in which he would die. This verb sakaf in Aramaic being a verb that means both to be exalted, put on high, and crucified. It's actually used in Ezra 6, combining this pun. This is a pun. When I am lifted up, when I am crucified, you will know who I am. Echoes of Exodus 3:14, the theophany on Sinai, I guess it is, to Moses, the burning bush. So you have all this background to what is going to be then the argument that this, whoever it was, developed in the letter to the Hebrews, which is incredible. And he's going to talk about Christ as priest, which is an innovation. It was a topic that had not occurred, or that had not, the opportunity had not arisen prior to this epistle. Maybe even the community was not adequate. Maybe it was, some, ex-Essene priests, etc. I don't know. I just know it's an incredible epistle. And so he's going to be approached not only as revealing son, but as redeeming high priest. That's very, very interesting. Now, if you went back to our friend Isaiah 53, this famous verse about, if he offers his life or his soul, if he pours his soul uh, as an asham, as the reparation offering, the most complete one. We have to talk about this. The servant is said to pour out his soul, to empty his soul, very similar to Philippians 2. The Ekenos and this, he emptied himself of his being in the form of God, etc. Philippians 2. And he pours himself, just like a liquid is poured out. Well, here it says, if he pours his soul as an asham, it's a difficult stuff to translate. The Hebrew is very, very difficult all through. The Essenes had a field day with some of the stuff in it, using these ambiguities in the fourth servant song to get a lot of messianic cloth out of it, and all the incredible Pesher interpretation the Dead Sea Scroll monks did. But this is the precise verse that Paul uses in Romans when he says that Christ offered himself as a sin offering. And this is one of the most mistranslated verses in the Christian Bible. In Romans 8, verse 3, he sent his son in a flesh like unto sin, and as perihamartias, as a concerning sin thing. But if you really look at it, and I think some Bibles have a footnote on this, if you really look at perihamartias, around sin or concerning sin, as borrowing from the Greek of Isaiah 53, which for asham this time translates perihamartias, sin offering, which is a different word that the Greek translation Septuagint usually uses for asham. This is very unusual. If you're looking at this on YouTube, I have an article, a little note on my website, types of sacrifices in Leviticus. And you have the olah, which is the going up Holocaust thing in Greek, a whole burnt offering. Then you have the mincha, which is the cereal offering. Then you have the zabat shelamim, the peace offering or something. Then you have the asham, thoroughly studied by Jacob Milgrom, I think the greatest expert on Leviticus. May he rest in peace, of blessed memory. And he says this is the one that actually removes guilt. This sin offering, it's the most comprehensive one. Most comprehensive one. So that when we got to Hebrews 9 and you talk about if the blood of bulls and goats, which is Yom Kippur stuff, asham is not mentioned in Yom Kippur, Leviticus 16. But if all those other sacrifices with blood of bulls and goats can clean your body or ritually purify you to worship in the temple, how much more will the blood of Christ, who offered himself through the eternal Spirit? That would be some oblique, admittedly, a sort of very indirect reference to Isaiah 53. The servant offers himself, pours out himself as an asham, the most complete offering to wipe out sin and clean the conscience. Asham encompasses the remorse or guilty feeling of the offender, plus the reparation he must make for his wrong. Jacob Milgrom. So you have this incredible cultic background to how Jesus' passion is understood. in approaching 20 minutes, I am going to stop there.